Saddle hunting for me has been a complete, and I hate even saying the word, game changer for how I like to hunt. If you've been thinking about getting into a saddle, now is the exact perfect time to do it. You have the entire spring and summer to kind of dangle in the backyard and get prepared for the upcoming season, be able to practice all your shots, getting in and out of the tree, experiment with your different climbing options that you have to lighten your load and be more mobile. If you're interested in getting hooked up and getting into a saddle, I would definitely be checking out TETHRD. They have two great saddles out. One is the new Phantom saddle, which is killer, has a bunch of new comfort features that are built into it, as well as a Utila bridge to kind of help with lengthening and shortening the bridge to make sure you have the optimum comfort. And you can get the OG, as I like to refer to it, that I've been doing my hunting out of the past couple years, which is the Mantis saddle. I might also recommend the Predator platform, especially if you're transitioning from a tree stand to a saddle. It just gives you that little bit sense of familiarity that you would have with a platform under your feet that you would have that would be similar to a tree stand, and it made my transition a couple years ago really seamless from tree stand hunting to saddle hunting. So if you're interested in checking out more about saddle hunting in general, I would head over to tetherednation.com, check out all their products. They have some killer YouTube videos. You will thank me later. The first thing I do in the morning before a hunt, before a scout, or just before getting ready for work is have my morning coffee, and I'm sure most of you out there listening are the same. Make sure you're filling your mug with Skull Brew coffee, as it is the only coffee company that is both 2% for conservation certified and donates 10% of its profits to conservation organizations to help secure the future of our wild places. So head to skullbrewcoffee.com and choose between 3 killer roasts of coffee and know that you are supporting conservation with every sip. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 178. Today I'm joined by Jared Shaffer, and we're talking mobile hunting in the West Virginia mountains. So stay tuned. All right. What is going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you're feeling fine. Well, we're off to a great start here with the voice. Hope everyone's doing well out there. You know, this past week, it felt like spring has finally sprung here in Pennsylvania. We got some decent weather, which was much more conducive to turkey hunting, more so than the past week. We've just had some really weird kind of cold, abnormally cold, kind of odd temperatures for the middle of May. And so this was the first weekend that we finally kind of felt like, you know, we're on the right side of the weather, you know, rolling here toward the end of May, getting closer to that June time frame. Turkey season, of course, in Pennsylvania, we've got about 2 weeks left, a little less than 2 weeks when this comes out. And so the weather feels like it's just becoming just a little bit more conducive for that. So this past weekend, like I'd mentioned in the previous podcast, I did get a chance to head back to the family farm, catch a turkey hunt with my buddy Tate. Which was awesome. Was able to go back and pick up the trailer that I'll be converting it into the rut wagon. I gotta say, man, you know, it's like 90. I think last year, whenever I was just curious as I was driving home yesterday, you know, the couple hours that I had in the car, I was starting to think about like how many hunts last year, as far as like, you know, percentage of hunts like private versus public, just because I was curious. And I think last year, out of all my hunts, you know, I hunted one day with my dad on his property, the opening day of gun season. I was carrying a bow, of course, but so that was one. And then I don't think I had another one on. I think that was the only hunt that I did that wasn't like some sort of piece of public ground. If memory serves, not that it makes a big difference, but I was just kind of curious because the reason I started thinking about it was I couldn't remember the last time I was actually back to the family farm to hunt. And it's been a couple years since I've been back there. And so it was nice to kind of get back there and do a little turkey hunting. I think, you know, I think part of the reason why I enjoy turkey hunting back there so much is that turkey hunting for me, I think I've mentioned in the past, is a much less stressful and much less intense situation than deer hunting or than bow hunting. I'm pretty intense and neurotic about, you know, bow hunting whitetails, and so it's really hard for me to kind of be around a group of people or hunt like a specific like chunk of land per se. just because I like to move a lot. If something's not happening in a spot, I want to be able to pick up and just kind of go. And so therefore, like, I'm probably not the best person to be in a deer camp necessarily. Especially, if it's, people hunt for all different reasons, and all of them are perfectly fine, and correct for those people. It's just, I sometimes don't mesh well, with those who are more into that, camp. Let's have some beers and hang out, and maybe we'll hunt and kill something. Maybe we won't. I'm more in the camp of, I'm going to bed early. I'm getting up early, and I'm going to grind all day. And if I don't, have success, it's like, then I'm going to spend my evening trying to figure out how I'm going to correct whatever mistakes I made the day before, or studying maps, or whatever the case is. And that's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. So in large part, I don't go to our family deer hunting camp typically because, it's just not the experience that I like during deer season. That being said, it is the experience that I like for turkey hunting, because it's like, I'm much less, intense and way more relaxed. And so I actually was talking to my father-in-law yesterday about it. I was like, you know what? I know it's kind of a bummer, that I don't come down to deer camp any longer, because it's just not, I don't enjoy myself during deer camp. I was like, what I would like to do is start doing a turkey camp, the opener of every year at the farm. Because I do enjoy the company of those guys, and during turkey season, I'm much more relaxed. It's like, if I get some hunting in, awesome. If I get to see turkeys, awesome. If I don't, awesome. I just have like a much more carefree kind of approach to it. And so I think what we're going to do, in the next few years, is go down to the farm for the opening day of turkey season, like the normal camp guys, and get together and have some beers and play some cards and hang out, get up Saturday morning, hunt some turkeys. PA, the opener, you can only hunt till noon, so you're done by noon. Maybe we all go grab lunch together, and then maybe go play some golf or something like that in the afternoon together, just kind of like make a day of it or whatever. And I was like, man, I can get into that. Like, that would be fun. The weather should be nice, those types of things. So I think that that's what the plan's going to be going forward. So with that, had a really cool weekend. Really enjoyed my time back at the farm. There's just something about that one field that I walk through that just, nostalgic, maybe, like thinking back to all the hunts that I've had there in the past and stuff like that. So it was just a really cool kind of trip. I'm not going to get into the details of the hunt itself. I know my buddy Wilson and I are going to be doing a podcast here, kind of talking about turkey hunting, and I'll have Johnny Utah on to talk about his slam that he did, and we'll talk about turkey hunting a little bit on that one. So I'll kind of discuss that at that time, and we'll kind of keep moving on during this upfront. But I'm going to keep this pretty short, because I do want to just kind of jump into the meat of things. And I got a ton of stuff I got to try to get off my plate today, for the upcoming work week. So, one, just as an update, I did get the trailer, and I started kind of getting my materials together for that. And so I'll start kind of making that conversion into the rut wagon, which would be really cool. I think, I probably bit off more than I thought I was biting off once I kind of got it and recognized like the work that's going to go into it. But regardless, it's going to be a cool project, and looking forward to getting started on that. One other thing I want to make mention is that here, as we are coming up on the holiday at the end of the month, the Memorial Day holiday, just wanted to make mention that we're running a discount on Skull Brew Coffee website, so skullbrewcoffee.com. If you head over there, there's no promo code required. You can just go on, put something in your cart, and it's an automatic 20% discount, and we're running that through Memorial Day. So take advantage of that if you are in need of some beans or some ground coffee. Also, on a Skull Brew related note, we've been out of the backcountry roast for some time. It was in Antigua. We had some problems with the supplier, even prior to the whole pandemic. Just not being able to be consistent with getting us the beans that we needed. And so we actually moved on and are now replacing that with a Papua New Guinea. And so the backcountry roast is back, although it is a Papua New Guinea bean, which is awesome. I think it's we did a bunch of tasting, a bunch of cuppings to kind of figure out what was going to be a good replacement, and this one fits a very similar profile as the previous backcountry. So we felt like it was a good replacement. Check it out. Let me know what you guys think, and take advantage of that discount for the next 2 weeks. Also want to ask you guys, I know I made mention the last time, if you haven't yet, head over to YouTube and give the Truth from the Stand channel a subscribe and click the bell notification button. I've put some videos up there related to some freestyle hunting, related to planning out of state hunts, and then of course kind of recapping the Iowa hunt, doing all this stuff on maps, kind of showing you my thought process and how I kind of put those those hunts together. So if you haven't yet, head over to the YouTube channel and do those couple things. That would be super killer. So with that, we're going to get ready to get jumped into the show here. I have Jared Shaffer on this episode. Jared, you might know him as Flinging Arrows from a couple different places. He's from West Virginia. He's a mobile hunter. He actually works for TETHRD, and he was actually, he was very much a DIY saddle guy before, TETHRD was formed, which is, all those guys were kind of in that DIY space, and Jared was no different. So Jared's been kind of DIYing a lot of saddle stuff for years, and he was actually one of the guys that I kind of looked to whenever I was going through, first getting introduced to a saddle and trying to figure out my climbing mechanisms and stuff like that. Jared's had a lot of really good videos, or has put out a lot of really good videos with climbing mechanisms and just things that are related to saddle hunting. And every time I was doing a search, as I was trying to learn more and more about it a couple years ago, he always kind of kept popping up. And so I wanted to have him on, not just because he, is a saddle hunter, but he also hunts in West Virginia in kind of mountainous terrain where, that mobile hunting and light kind of hunting is kind of a requirement to a degree to hunt some of the places that he's hunting. And so I wanted to talk to him a little bit about that because I do enjoy the big woods and kind of, severe kind of topographical changes, which is what I kind of am able to get into whenever I head to Southern Ohio. So in this episode, we talk mobile hunting, we talk West Virginia mountains, we talk a little bit of turkey hunting, and let's go ahead and get the Ginger Ninja on the line. And thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have a fella on that I'm going to be honest, man. It's like my introduction to saddle hunting was actually through this guy's videos. And I first learned of him as I just thought his name was badass online. It was Flinging Arrows. And I was like, man, if a guy's name is Flinging Arrows and he's hunting out of a saddle, I was like, I got to become friends with this guy. And then I found out he shreds the guitar too. As a fellow guitar player, I was like, I feel like this guy might be like my long lost, distant ginger brother from West by God, Virginia. And it's none other than Jared Shaffer. What's going on, man?
Oh, not a whole lot, Clint. I'm doing well. I'm just trying to get through this whole quarantine thing. Doing a good turkey, but I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm hanging in there. I've lost count of how many days now I've been in quarantine, man. It started for me because I live in the eastern part of PA, so I'm kind of in the hot zone for Pennsylvania. Actually, I'm smack dab in the middle of where it's bad because I live in Bucks County, but Bucks County and Montgomery County are the two worst counties outside of like the city, outside of Philadelphia, and the city's not too far away for me, so I'm kind of like right in the middle of it. So I think I started working from home. Man, I want to say it was like March 10th or 15th or something like that. So that's like how long I've basically been locked in. It's been
2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Granted, I've been able to get out and do like a little bit of turkey hunting and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I always say on the show, it's like I'm a terrible turkey hunter, but I do enjoy getting out. I was doing a whole lot of scouting for a while, on the weekends because I just didn't have anything else to do. So I would just go out with the dog and spend hours in the woods. So I got some good spots, picked out for this year, what I think might be good. So that was the one kind of silver lining. But how's your turkey season been, man? You been getting after the birds?
Yeah, I've been after them. It's been rough to say the least. We've had just a super cold and wet spring this year, and it's been really, really tough. I did kill a really good bird, kind of the start of the second week here in West Virginia, and I've been out trying to get my second one, and man, it's been awful. I can't find one to save my life, but I've been chasing after them and trying it. So it's been fun, but I'm ready to go fishing, man. I'm ready to switch gears.
Nice, man. Well, I mean, at least you're seeing birds. So my MO is like, well, this is how my turkey hunts usually go. A lot of times I'll go back to our family farm for years, because there's tons of turkeys back there, and you know where they roost, and you know where they're going to fly down, and it's one of those deals. And so, I'm not so into turkey hunting that I'm going to drive 3 hours because I grew up, more in like western, centrally kind of Pennsylvania, and
Right.
I'm just not into it enough to drive. And I'm like, I got plenty of public land around here. I was like, I'll just hunt public, and unless my daughter wants to go, then I'll take her back home. But my turkey hunt usually goes, this is like, it was perfect this year. I got into the timber like super early. I found out about this small little piece that my buddy, he's a freak when it comes to turkeys, and he roosted a bunch of birds in a bunch of different pieces of public. And he was like, hey, Are you going out Saturday? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I know there's at least one really big gobbler in this one piece. He's like, because I got him on camera and I got him roosted. He's like, and it's only 18 acres. He's like, so people overlook it. He was like, if you slip in there, he was like, you should be good. He's like, but just get there really early, park your truck, because you park right along the road. He's like, and if people see your truck there, he's like, they're not going to walk in because really only one dude can hunt that spot.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, cool. So I was like, perfect. I'll go do that. So I drove to the spot, parked. I was there at I got there like 4 a.m. I was at like the tree that I was planning to hunt at or whatever. I'd never been there before. So I just followed this topo line and roughly where he was kind of talking about. Set up, and I'm in a ghillie jacket and I'm kind of waiting, and man, it's not even first light yet. It's just like light enough behind me, like on like the top of this kind of ridge, I can see like anything to be skylit, and I see this guy walking behind me. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I'm like whistling at him, trying to let him know that I'm there. You know what I mean? Like, so he doesn't blow me up. And he got so close to me that and I was in like it was just that light where it's like you can start to see movement. And Pennsylvania turkey hunting on public ground can be a little bit dangerous for your health, because you may get shot. People will shoot at just movement. And so he was getting a little too close for comfort, and so I just yelled at him. I was like, hey, and he just kind of I could see he put his arm up and he recognized that I was there, and he just started walking down the ridge a little bit. I was like, you got to be kidding me, And so I'm sitting there and daylight cracks. And I hear 3 gobblers, and then that guy literally only moved maybe 50 yards in front of me, and then daylight cracked, 3 gobblers, and he just takes off like a shot toward the gobblers. And I was like, well, there you go. I was like, that was so I basically got in the truck, went to another spot, and I ended up deer scouting with a gun like the rest of the day. It was pretty much my
yeah, that's public land turkey hunting for you.
Yeah, that's right. And then I went out this past one day during, before work, I got out and actually went with my buddy Wilson to hunt. He and I went together, and it never fails. If we go separate of one another, we'll either see what we're looking for, or we'll at least have some level of success, like a visual, or we'll hear turkeys if we're turkey hunting or whatever. If we go together, it doesn't matter what we're hunting. We're not going to see anything.
Right. Yeah.
Just looking for proof of life. We've done it multiple times where we were like, hey, it's late season. Let's go try to kill a doe. And he's got a bunch of small parcels he has access to. And he's like, hey, I got a double stand over here, or a double tree over here we can get into, or I've got a blind over here we can get in, and one of us will film and one of us will shoot. And be like, oh, okay, cool. It never fails. Not once have we seen a deer when we've done that. Not once.
Yep.
But
yeah.
So I'm glad to see that you're at least having a little bit more luck than me, man. So that's good. At least you got one on the ground.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy with the one I got. And, I got a buddy of mine that we kind of do the same thing you were talking about. We'll go hunting together and film and stuff. And it's the same deal. It's like we'll hunt together and never see anything, and then, hunt separate, and we have awesome hunts. But, he's been struggling this year to kill birds. So it's, I know a lot of people that have had a tough time with it. So I'm thankful I got my one. So that's all I get this year, and I'm happy with it. So
right. Yeah. It seems like they're being, we've had the same kind of cold, and wet spring here as well, which hasn't helped. But it seems like to me, they've just, from what I've heard around here, they've just been really quiet lately. It seems like they were cranked up and fired up the opening day around here. And then since then, it's, from what I've heard from guys that go out most every day, they were just like, man, some mornings they can't buy a gobble.
Yep. It's been the same here. So it gets frustrating after several days in a row.
Yeah, exactly. But man, before we get too far gone into this, man, for those out there that are listening that, maybe don't know who you are, haven't seen any you in any videos or anything like that, could you just give us a little bit of background about, where you're from, what you do for a living, those types of things?
Yeah. So, my name's Jared Shaffer. I'm 33 years old. I live in north central West Virginia, so I'm about half hour from the PA line, so not terribly far from you. But I was an electrical technician for about 13 years, and then this past year I actually started working for TETHRD full time, doing the media directing and the promotional material, stuff like that. So I've been doing that the past year, and I've been hunting West Virginia pretty much my whole life, ever since I was big enough to walk, and grew up hunting the big woods and the mountains around here. And the past couple of years, I've kind of branched out and started hunting out of state and doing some different trips and stuff. So, I've just been a deer hunter my whole life, and it's one thing I'm passionate about, and I always try to have fun with it and try to put some deer on the ground. So
that's right, man. That's the name. That's the name of the game. The media stuff that you guys are doing, man. It's first off, you guys got to do you guys do a great job. I'm always envious. I'm a novice. I just started playing around with and learning on my own Premiere Pro, and kind of getting into, which is a rabbit hole to kind of go down. My past life, I was an audio engineer before I work in marketing and advertising now, but in my past life, I was, a musician, and that's what I did. And I was an audio engineer and stuff like that. And, so, I have an understanding of like the software and how to edit and stuff like that. But it's just, I think the thing that always kept me away from it to a degree, cause I loved like audio engineering, and I loved producing, making records and stuff like that. And I was really kind of a nerd. Like I liked the tech side of it, and I liked the editing side of it, like the precision of it and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, I just always kind of stayed away from like the video stuff, because it was just like you're now dealing with like audio and video that have to marry up. And it has to tell a story. And sometimes you're using audio or there's video that's not related to your audio. Like, and so it was just so much more to manage. And I'll just be the first to admit that I am not organized enough to keep my files organized correctly. So now when I'm doing YouTube, so now when I'm doing YouTube videos, it's like, it takes me forever, because I'm literally like pecking and hunting through like my hard drive, like trying to find like, okay, I want this clip now. I know it's in this one video. Now where did I put it? It's like, it's constantly.
Yeah. Well, I do the same thing, so don't feel bad. Yeah. I've got just so much footage, and, I try to put something together, and I got this clip in mind, and it'd take me half a day to find it, but it's fun. It's something I've been doing for a long, long time. Since I was a little kid. I don't know. I just always had a fascination with cameras and stuff. And, I got into it before it was the thing to do, before YouTube and Facebook. So I've just been, I don't know. I just always wanted to do it, and never thought that I would actually do it as a career. So it's pretty cool to do that.
Right. Yeah, for sure, man. Because you guys make some killer stuff. Like you do a really good job. Like the content's funny. It's well shot. It's well produced.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm always envious. We'll see how mine goes. Today I spent about half a day trying to figure out how to get my audio to reappear, because when I exported it lost audio. Like I had like 10 minutes of audio, and then like a 3-minute gap where it didn't have any, and then the last like 2 minutes of the video had audio, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. So it's like I had to reconfigure things, and it's just kind of a little bit of a nightmare. But back to hunting, dude. How did you get started hunting? Like, do you come from a hunting family? West Virginia, I'm familiar somewhat with like where you grew up a little bit, being from Bedford, PA. I'm not too far from like Berkeley Springs and stuff like that. So, I doubt our like hunting cultures are all that terribly different, but I'm just curious, did you come from a big hunting family, or was that kind of how you got started?
Yeah, I did. My dad's a hunter. My granddad was a hunter, great granddad. So, come from a long line of hunters, and pretty serious hunters as well. I always, from the time I was, big enough to walk, I was tagging along with my dad, going squirrel hunting and stuff like that. He was a big bow hunter when I was pretty little, and, I would always wait for him to come home from his hunts and listen to what he saw and stuff like that. So I was just ate up with it at a young age. And, I got my first kind of serious bow when I was about 7 years old, and he just kind of turned me loose. And I chased deer all over the place with that thing. And, I couldn't hit any of them. I shot a bunch of them. But,
right.
He started taking me out when I started getting, 11, 12 years old. And, I killed my first deer with a rifle when I was 12. And, we started bow hunting and, using climbing stands and kind of moving around. And, he kind of taught me kind of the start of mobile hunting and how to figure out how deer travel and stuff like that. So, that's always just kind of been how I did things and kind of how I got my start. So it was definitely cool growing up, being able to do that stuff.
Right. That's interesting, man. 'Cause it sounds like your dad, was, he was mobile before mobile was cool. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If he was teaching you that, at that young of an age, I'm curious, like you're saying that he's a big, he was always kind of big into bow hunting. Were there any guys that he kind of learned from or took stuff from? 'Cause I'm trying to think, like, you and I aren't too, well, we have a little bit of a gap in age. So I'm thinking your dad's probably just a little younger than my dad. And so I'm imagining like that probably would have been about the time, Andre was really kind of doing like the bump and dump and like really kind of getting mobile and Dan, obviously doing what he does. So were those guys, internet age wasn't a thing, right? So, I mean, you could have lived 2 states over and people had no clue who you are, but was he doing any following of that kind of methodology?
As far as I know, he wasn't. He wasn't real big into that kind of stuff. I think it was more or less just kind of figure it out on your own and, going off of what he had learned. And, my dad didn't kill a lot of deer with a bow. I mean, a few when I was younger, a couple nice bucks. And then as I kind of started getting into it, he just kind of quit bow hunting, kept rifle hunting and stuff. Mm-hmm. But, he wasn't huge in the tactics part of it. Mm-hmm. And, when he kind of turned me loose, I kind of had to start figuring things out for for myself. And, it took me years and years and years to figure it out and actually finally kill the deer with a bow. But, I just, he kind of got me started in it, and I was just kind of setting from there, and I had to kind of take it and kind of run with it.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, man, because it sounds like, we have similar backgrounds as far as like our dads go. So my dad bow hunted growing up as well. Not a lot, and I've mentioned this on the podcast. Like he would take he was a big, traditional bow. That's what he used. I don't ever remember there being a compound bow in the house. And he would go out like a couple times a year with it. Usually it would be on like, it wasn't like he was all geeked up and like the opening of archery season came and he was ready to roll. Like usually he and I would go out and do a lot of small game hunting and stuff like that. And because I never picked up a bow and started hunting with a bow until I was probably 30. It was like whenever I finally picked one up.
Wow.
It was just because, it wasn't a big thing for him. And he would basically go do it. I remembered back on it, like after I got older and I started bow hunting, where it always was windy days. Cause and I always tell people this too. It's like, I never hunted out of an elevated platform of any type until I was in my 30s. Like it was always ground hunting, like, all my life. And so my dad was big on like moving and using the wind and trying to basically stalk bedded deer. And that was kind of how he liked to hunt with a bow but big rifle hunting, but it wasn't, again, like he wasn't like a tactician necessarily. It was more, he was teaching me more hunting ethics and, respect for the land and the animals and stuff like that. That was more, I think, probably what I got from him more so than anything. Because now he's like, I'll tell him about a trip of hunting. And he'll say, boy, if I had to think about all that shit to kill a deer, he's like, I don't think I'd ever get out of my truck.
That's funny. My dad's kind of the same way. I'm doing all these extreme measures now to kill a deer, and he just looks at me like I'm nuts. But, no, I think he likes watching me do it more than him ever doing that kind of stuff. But that is funny.
That's 100%. Because I was walking him through like the hunt I had in Iowa and how I was playing the wind and I recognized what the thermal was doing and this, that, the other. And he was like, Jesus, he was like, how do you get out of bed in the morning like to go do that, And that's what I realized, And look, he was like, hey, he's like, man, he's like, if you like it and that's what you like, he's like, then I love it. He's like, I just could never, I could never do that, But yeah, so it's kind of funny. So now I think he lives a little vicariously through me in regards to that. And then he'll ask me, he has a property back home that he'll go back and come up from, the Carolinas. He'll come up, hunt a couple days during bow season and stuff like that. Because I finally got him to get a bow and do a little bit of archery hunting and stuff. And so he'll usually call me and be like, before he comes up, and say, hey, what's the weather look like this weekend? What's the wind going to do? What's, what locations you think are good? It's like asking me like where I should set up, And so I'll tell him like, well, this day I would hunt here, this day I would hunt here, and this day I would hunt here, And so I set him up with his hunts, and that's, I guess he figures now that I know, now that I know enough of it, he doesn't need to know any of it, so he's good.
That's funny because my dad does the same exact thing. We have a lease together in Ohio, and he does the same thing. Ask me, like, what the deer are doing and the wind and everything. So you just tell me where to go, and that's where I'm going. So it's absolutely funny. Yeah,
exactly. My dad's probably more interested in bear hunting than he is deer hunting at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He loves the bear hunt. He wants to kill a Pennsylvania bear in the worst way. That's his thing. And he's had a couple opportunities. The funny story was he took me bear hunting when I was like 17. It was the first time I ever went out. And he was telling me before we got out of the truck, he was like, hey, there's a guy, bear hunting in Pennsylvania is not like a TV thing. He's like, look, guys might hunt all their life in Pennsylvania and maybe not even see an adult bear in the woods, and in the area that we lived. And I was like, all right. He's like, so it's not like deer hunting. He's like, you might not see anything. And I was like, all right, that's fine. Let's go. We get out of the truck and we're walking through this like mountain laurel on this game lands. And we weren't in the woods 30 minutes and I shot a bear. Like, and he was just like, I can't believe it.
Great.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. But he gave me that whole lecture.
He's still after one. Huh?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is like, well, it wasn't funny. It's kind of crappy into the story, but like I hit that bear, and then it started raining like immediately after, and we tracked it like all day. I shot it at first light. God, I don't know what, like maybe 7:30. You know what I mean? Like you could see through the scope, like it was legal shooting light. And we tracked till dark, up and down multiple ridges, and I don't even know how far we went. And we had lost blood, but we could see like where it was running and was breaking off trees that it was running through and stuff. And we got to this last ridge, and it's pouring rain, and it's just about ready to get dark. And he's like, do you want to go up one more ridge? And I was like maybe 16, 17. And I was like, look, if he's made it this far, I was like, I must have not hit him where I thought I hit him. I was like. And so he was like, and he's like, I agree with you. He's like, I don't think you hit him as good as you thought you did. And so we backed out. And then 2 days later, he goes into work, and a guy said, hey, my dad's name's Fred. He's like, hey, Fred, you and your boy, were you hunting bears this weekend? He's like, yeah, did you guys get anything? He's like, oh, my son hit one. He's like, and he told him where we were at, and he was like, he just never found him. He was like, we went over, and the guy was from the same, because this was right where my dad grew up. Like, it's literally in the same like little village town that my dad grew up. It's in this area called the Cove, and so this guy grew up with my dad and knew exactly where he was talking about. And he was like, well, I found this bear up on this ridge the next day, dead, and that was literally the ridge that we didn't walk up.
Oh, man.
So he found him. When the guy offered him, he's like, hey, if your boy wants him, he was like, I'll give him to him. Just tell him, come over, bring a tag and tag him, and you can have him. And then, we'll call the game commission or whatever and see if he can get his tag back or whatever. And my dad came home and told me, and I said, if I didn't find him, I'd end the hunt. I was like, it's not my bear.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know what I mean? I was like, so that was that. So even though it did, I was able to shoot one. Someone else recovered it, and so I don't have it. So that I'm still on the hunt for the bear. So. But yeah, so we'll see. That was a valuable lesson. What's that?
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. So, man, I want to talk to you a little bit about, first, knowing that your dad hunts mobile, and that was kind of like you started kind of hunting mobile. Like, as you started kind of progressing as a deer hunter, when you started thinking more probably about like how mobile was playing into how you're approaching things, like how did it start to change like any of your strategies or your tactics over the years as you kind of became more and more mobile?
Yeah, so we always hunt with, climbing stands. My dad, he would pre-set a ladder stand for me, back behind the house, and I'd never sit in that thing. Like, I just couldn't sit still,
Right.
So I would just pick pretty much random spots, really. And, if I'd see deer doing a certain thing off the distance, I'd just pick up and move. And, I killed a lot of deer that way. And, just over the years, I just started picking up on patterns and how they travel, with different terrain and stuff like that. And, I really think that played into, my success, as I started, being a more successful bow hunter, I guess. And, I would just go where the deer were at, and it was really pretty simple. I didn't think about it too much. Just, if there wasn't any deer there, I would move. I'd move until I found them. And then, once I saw them doing a certain thing, I would, move in on them. And then, over time, you kind of start picking up on little things and how they travel and certain areas they like to use. And, you can start to translate that to other areas. And I really think that learning to hunt that way, it took me a long time to learn, but, now I can go into a new area and pick it apart pretty quick. And, I'm kind of thankful that I learned that way. Just, it's not something you can read about or, have somebody just tell you. You kind of have to just get out and do it yourself and kind of just figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100% agree, man. I mean, it's one of those things where, like what you were kind of executing like very early was that the thing that, is very in vogue now, right? Which is a lot of people,
Yeah.
I feel like when they see deer move, it's they almost get paralyzed and don't want to move because they don't want to mess it up. And it's actually the exact opposite thing that you should be doing. Right. It's
Yeah.
like, cause
Yeah.
those deer
Sure.
are telling you, like they're giving you a piece of information, right? They're telling you that you're not in the game. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
you can stay where you're at and continue to be out of the game. And sure, you won't spook anything. And you also
Right.
probably won't kill
Yeah.
anything. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like,
Exactly.
or you can kind
Yeah.
of, get down and make a move. And, I don't think either of us, or any other folks that you and I know that hunt this way would advocate like just blowing through and blowing deer out. It's like, but sometimes that's the consequence to try to get yourself into position. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's,
For sure.
and it's a risk reward thing, right? It's like, I guess, talk to me a little bit about that. It's like, cause as a young guy being impatient, cause I'm right there with you. I'm still kind of that way. You know what I mean? Where, you know, how did you start to learn? Cause like you were saying, there's a learning curve there, right? And you didn't really have anyone that was showing you how to do this. You were just kind of doing it on your own. You started picking little things up and stuff like that. Like, how did you start kind of figuring out like when to be aggressive, when to not be aggressive? Like when you see some deer move, when you should make a move, and when you're watching deer move and you're going, I don't think making a move right now is quite the right thing to do. And so talk to me a little bit about how you were kind of making those decisions.
Yeah. So, when I was really young, 10, 11 years old, I was hunting on the ground a lot, doing a lot of stalks and stuff like that. And, I wasn't afraid to blow every deer out of the property. It's just, you just didn't even think about it back then. You didn't think about the pressure and those kind of things. So, I would do these stalks and stuff, and man, I got a lot of shots doing that. And then, as I progressed to using a tree stand and stuff like that, I carried that same mentality. Was like, the deer's over there. I'm going over there after it. If I'm put out there, who cares? There'll be more of them. So, I've never been afraid to bust a deer out of an area. And, sure, back in the early days, I probably hurt myself a lot more than, I needed to, but I also killed a lot of deer that way. And I've actually got 2 bucks on my wall that I'm looking at right now. That's a really good example of that I kind of killed back in my early years. I just, hunting these spots that were historically good. I observed these bucks going in and out of bedding, basically, is what I saw them doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would move right in on them. I mean, the very next hunt, even the same day, I would just move in on them right where I thought I needed to be, without hardly any regard to the wind or anything like that. This is before I really took that into account. And, I was having some pretty good success. I killed a couple of nice bucks doing that. And, as the years go on, I start learning about the wind and thermals and, stuff like that. And then, I'm making these moves with a lot more thought behind them. So, my tactics, I guess you could say, just got more refined. I'm paying more attention to that type of stuff. And, I've just seen a lot of success doing it that way.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things, like, you just do it so much that, your gut just kind of tells you when it's time to go. If you got to strike when the iron's hot. I mean, if there's a buck in an area and he's there, I mean, he's not going to be there forever. Somebody else is going to kill him or bump him out there or something. So, I mean, you can't just sit back out of the game. I mean,
Right.
I'm a firm believer in just, try to move in, do it smart, try to time it right, with cold front, wind, stuff like that. And, try to make it happen. If you sit back too long, something else might happen and you might not get a shot at him. So, it's like you said, high risk, high reward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one thing that, no matter how old somebody is or how long they've been bow hunting or whatever, I think when you finally get to a point, at least I would be curious to see if you feel the same way, but from my observation and just like personal experience is that, success is ultimately built on a mountain of failure, and that was one thing that, I talked to, I had, Dan on, and he and I were talking about that, one day, just about people's fear of failure. And like what they don't realize is like that that failure is ultimately what's going to get you to a point where you're going to start seeing consistent success. Because there's no other way to do it in the deer woods. Like there just isn't. Like you can read as many books as you want. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want. You can, and there's some guys out there that put on deer clinics, like the workshop that Dan does or Eberhard or whoever, right? That you go and you can learn so much from these guys, right? You can be like me and start a podcast so you can learn more. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the reasons why I started this whole thing, was so I could pick the brains of like really good deer hunters. And but until you go out and you start actually putting those things into practice and screwing it up time and time again, like until you do those things, like the success just doesn't come. You know what I mean? It sounds it's kind of like what you were doing. It sounds like you early on was seeing things and trying to figure it out, and as you were trying to figure it out, you were blowing hunts. But when you would blow a hunt, you'd be like, oh, so that's why that happened, right?
Yeah.
Now it's in your bag of tricks.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you just have to look at each hunt and just kind of evaluate what went wrong, what went right, and if I screw up a hunt now, I just look at it as just one step closer to success. I guess I've just done it enough to know that if you just stay persistent at it and keep trying to make the right decisions and learning from what you've done, that it's eventually going to pay off for you. So you just got to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard work. It's not
really
easy. It's you got to just put your time. There's not a magic bullet for it. It's time and persistence. And if you have enough of those two things, you'll eventually start finding success pretty frequently. I think too, there's like just defining success differently. I think when you hunt really mobile and you are aggressive, it's like, for me, a successful hunt is if I was in the game. It wasn't necessarily wrapping a tag around something. It's like, man, if I'm consistently putting myself in the game and having encounters, I mean, especially in somewhere like PA with as much pressure as we have, it's like if I have like 2 really good like mature buck encounters during bow season in Pennsylvania, like I'm winning, especially on public, you know what I mean? So I think people have to think about framing success differently too, so they don't get beat themselves up too much. So
yeah, and I mean my season last year is a prime example of that. I mean, I had I just started working full time for TETHRD, so I had a lot of time to hunt, and right off the bat, I killed a buck on public land in Kentucky. I mean, like my second or third sit, I can't remember, just real quick, killed a buck, come back to West Virginia, and got on another buck. Probably should have killed him that morning. Didn't work out. Went to Ohio, hunted for I don't know how many days. Ended up missing a dandy 10-pointer, probably close to 150.
Wow.
And so I got my opportunity there and blew it. And then I went to Missouri and on public land and had an opportunity at a great buck, probably close to 140, and it was just too dark to see my pins. So, then the gate there, and then come back, and I think I hunted over 300 hours this past year, just grinding away at it. And I finally did kill a second buck in Ohio in January, but it was just, like you said, I was in the game a lot, and that kept me going and kept me motivated. But I mean, even with a lot of time to hunt, I still have all those opportunities and not get one. So you look at the normal guy that hunts just weekends and stuff like that, and it's easy to see how some people can go, a couple of seasons without getting one. I mean, it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, it's. Yeah, especially depending on what state you're in and stuff like that. Because I mean that's a prime example. It's like having plenty of time to, and like you said, you were in the game, which to me that's success. You know what I mean? Like you were having great encounters, seeing deer. I mean that's just, I mean that's cool. And the other thing is too I think people get so caught up in the moment of what's going on that they don't learn, like they don't observe, like they see but don't observe. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably like one of the biggest changes for me is that, maybe I see a buck that's just slightly out of range, right? Maybe he comes through and does what I think he's going to do, but instead of being 20 yards, away from me, maybe he's 50, you know what I mean? But then, I mean, that's an opportunity to watch that deer and see what he's going to do and how he reacts. And is he with another deer and how does he react to another deer? And when he finally gets into a position where he hits my scent cone, like how does he react to that? You know what I mean? does he respond to, to calling or not? Or, does he look like he's posturing to be dominant, or, just all those little things you start to pick up on, like just watching deer behavior. So when you see one at close range, you can start to tell what they're going to do before they do it,
Yeah.
Sure. So just kind of being a student of things. But since you touched on it, man, I want to jump to it, and we'll talk more about mobile hunting here in a second, man. But I do want to talk about your out of state hunt. Cause I know you went down, like you mentioned, to Kentucky. That was on public, right?
Yeah. That was public early September. Yeah.
Yeah. For a velvet buck. So talk to me a little bit about that area that you were hunting, the habitat, and the overall kind of like lay of the land in that spot.
Yeah. So this was like farm country, a lot of corn and beans and, hardwoods and stuff like that. And that's completely new to me. Like we don't have anything like that around here. So, I kind of, I tried to cyber scout as much as I could. And my tactic was, it was going to be early season. It was going to be hot. So I'm looking for like isolated water sources that are kind of adjacent to these crop fields. Mm-hmm. And, I drove down there by myself and, met up with Parker McDonald with the Southern Ground podcast. And, what I figured out pretty quick was that, those crop fields were getting pounded by other people. I mean, there was so much pressure. And, I just kind of started looking for places that people weren't going. The first day I did a lot of scouting, trying to find an area to hunt. And I thought I found a spot that was pretty good. And I sat there that evening, didn't see anything. And then the next day I did a really long hike. Like I think it was like 4.5 miles or something like that, looking for sun. The heat index was over 100 degrees.
I saw that part of the video.
I was die.
I saw that part of the video where I think he said, "I think I'm having a heat stroke" or something like that.
I really did. Like I had pulled up my phone and was going to text Parker that, like, if you don't hear from me in an hour, I'm not out here, because I literally thought I was going to pass out. It was so hot. But the funny thing about that hunt, and this comes down to what you were just talking about with being observant. So I was driving down a gravel road before daylight that morning, and I saw a buck come out of the parking lot that was just right off the main road. There was a parking lot right there, gravel lot. So this buck comes walking out of a bean field right by this parking lot. It's right before daylight. It's not too far away, and he just hopped across the road into this thick brush. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. He's probably not too far from where he's bedded at if it's this close to daylight.
Right.
So I started looking at the map, and it like light bulb moment. So it's like this little triangle of woods between all these crop fields, and I zoom in on the aerial map, and there's a little water hole right in the middle of it. I'm like, oh man, he's got to be bedded in there. So midday that day, I get down on another area right down the road, and I snuck into that water hole to see what kind of sign was around there. And there was definite buck tracks around that, on that little pond, and some old rubs and stuff like that. So I, backed out of there, went back that evening, kind of had an idea of where he might have been bedded at. And he actually, I don't know exactly where he was at. I mean, he was in that little group of woods, but he came in behind me. It was, just a nice 7-pointer, full velvet. And I've never killed a velvet buck, so that was just my goal, was to kill a nice velvet buck. And I ended up getting him, and it was a really cool hunt. But I literally killed him 60 yards from my truck, where my truck was parked.
You can't beat that there, especially in 100-degree heat, man.
Yeah,
you had to get a break somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, we're gonna kill you with a heat stroke, but if you kill a deer, we'll make sure it's only about half a football field away from your truck. How's that for a deal?
Yeah, so it worked out. But I just thought it was funny that he was the best guy, killed him back close on the road. But I mean, just you got to kill them where they're at, and a lot of times, they're laying in spots like that where they can. They're watching all the pressure coming in and out. Where he was at, he could watch the parking lot. So I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's classic, kind of like overlooked little spot. You know what I mean? Where people are going to walk right by it because they're not going to pay it any mind, because they're like, it's too close to the road, or too close to the parking lot, or whatever. My one buddy, he and I'll go hunt together in Ohio, and we both like to grind and hunt hard and stuff like that. And there was this one spot that had like these just hammer scrapes, and these magnum bucks were showing up on them during usually like during the first week in November, and they were showing up pretty consistently. And then this particular year, they had a pretty bad EHD problem in this particular area of Ohio, and it dried up. So those deer ended up disappearing. I think a lot of them ended up dying, but we didn't know that at the time. So we knew we had deer on past 2 years on camera in that spot during like a 4-day window or whatever. But he would never hunt it because it was like, I was like, why don't you ever hunt that? And he's like, man, it's right along the road. Like it's not. And when I say it's a road, it's like an access road through the mountains that, you will see a dump truck on once in a while, but it's really like for logging. And that's really it. You know what I mean? Like for them to log this piece out. And he's like, it's just too close to the road, man. He's like, I just don't feel right. And I was like, hey man, I ain't got too much pride to go sit there. I was like, it's like an easy hike off the road. And I was like, cause I mean, everywhere else in that place was just like just a brutal, it's near West Virginia. So it's that very similar terrain. So you're familiar with that. So it's just, everything's up and down in a deep ravine and just like nasty, just briary mess and blow down everywhere. And just, basically a shithole, which makes it great for deer hunting. And I was like, man, I ain't too proud to hunt, 70 yards off the road. You know what I mean? So I ended up hunting that spot a couple times and, ended up seeing one buck. It was a really cool spot, but it was one of those little kind of overlooked places. And when you look at the map and you look at the topo, it all makes sense because it's literally the easiest path between two different ridge systems that they're going to want to run basically to check all their scrapes. Because you can walk down that ridge to the bottom of it, like where there's a saddle, and there's just like a big community scrape that's down there, and then that whole ridge is just littered with them.
Yeah, I've got a spot exactly like you're talking about that's on my place in Ohio, and you're literally 55, 60 yards from the road. Like a pretty well used, it's a gravel road, but I mean, it's, there's a lot of houses up on that ridge top, but I actually killed a nice buck right there in that spot. And the same spot was where I missed that big one last year. So it's just like a perfect travel corridor, and there's a little strip of pines along the road, and they skirt this pines, and nobody would even think to sit right there because I can literally watch people drive up and down the road, and I'm sure if they slowed down, they could see me in the tree. But I've really started looking for spots like that the past couple of years, just because I mean, there's deer use those areas, like you can find them. I mean, it's a killer spot.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. That's kind of been my thing too, is like trying to look. I no longer necessarily look first to go further than everybody else, because I love Onyx because it's such a useful tool, but it's also one of those things that it made everyone else, gave everyone else access to those like hard to reach deeper places, right? Because they just, some people wouldn't go any further than a half mile because they're just not confident walking into the woods any further than a half mile. You know what I mean? Because it's, they can get back out of the woods if they only go a half mile. The guy who's willing to go a mile, 2 miles or whatever, it's like you're a little further from the truck, you're a little further from, people or whatever. And so, that person usually has to have a little bit more of their wits about them about what they're doing and stuff like that. And until OnX came along, and then now everyone has GPS tracking. So it's like, well, I can at least find my way to a road, you know what I mean? At some point, you know what I mean? To get picked up if I get lost and turned around or whatever. So for me, it's like, I've kind of done what you were talking about, where it's like, I'll look at those deep in spots, but I'm usually at first looking for like the places where people are going to walk by. You know what I mean? Like, where's the little kind of nook and cranny where they're going to go like, man, there ain't no deer living in there, and that's the spot that I'm going to want to go check out. And then my other thing this year, man, is like, and I know you do this, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it, but I got a kayak this year. And so I've been looking for places that just like, that there is only a way, like you could only get in using water, and just kind of starting to prioritize water. Cause I know in the South, especially like, when you get into some of those swampier states where it's like water access is really, really one of the ways to deer hunt the best, right? Cause it opens up a lot more land to you. Up around here, it's not as prevalent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you find
the spot,
and there's just not as many guys that are going to do that, because it's, you can usually walk just about anywhere you want to go. So I started looking for like little pockets of water access and stuff like that, just because, and I found a handful this year that are just like, if the sign holds up that I saw whenever I was scouting this year, if it holds up, then I told my father-in-law, I was like, first weekend or first like opening day, if I get the right wind, I was like, I'm going to pull a big deer out of this one spot. I was like, I don't know how big he'll be. I was like, but he'll be decent. And he was like, I was like, I'm going to call my shot right now. So we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
do you kind of do the same thing, man, with water access? Are you using water access a fair amount?
I've got a couple spots now that I've scouted out, and like you said, it's hard to find areas around here where it's conducive to that kind of hunting, just because you only have long like stream systems that you can use a kayak on.
Right.
But, there are some lakes down here that there's a lot of public land, and I've been trying the last couple of years. Like that's been one of my goals, to kill a buck using a kayak. And I come so close last year. I actually found a food plot that the state had put in. There's gated roads all over this place, so they can have access to it. But there's actually like a 2-acre turnip plot, like way up on this ridge. And the only way to get to it is by boat, unless you want to walk about 4 miles. So I found it about a week too late because they had pretty much browsed it down. They had already eaten most of it, but I actually kind of went in there doing like a little bit of a scouting mission this past year, and I found that plot, and it was just torn up with sun. And I had all my gear with me, and I was like, I'm just going to set up and sit the rest of the afternoon. And I set up, and the deer started filtering out, and they were walking past me just perfect, 20 yards. And finally, I had a pretty decent buck come out, and I needed it to take like 5 steps, and I was going to have a 15-yard shot, and a bear ended up coming up into the field and just blew the whole field out. So I didn't get a shot at him. And I went back like maybe 4 or 5 days later, and the same exact thing happened. He was coming out, the same deer, and something blew him out. And I didn't end up getting a shot at him, but I come close. I'm still trying. So maybe this year will be the year I can kill one that way.
Nice. Yeah, that's. I want to give one a kayak ride in the worst way. So I got a couple spots here in PA, and then I'm going to Missouri this year. And so a couple of the places I was looking at in Missouri have some rivers, streams, stuff like that. And I kind of looked at those specifically because I wanted to have some places where I'd have to use a boat to get in and out to try to, limit, any pressure. I mean, people talk about pressure, out in the Midwest, and I'm like, man, like, like you put me on the heaviest hunted piece of public out in, the Midwest somewhere, and it will be like hunting a piece of private back here in a lot of ways, just, the amount of guys that I'm kind of used to around here. But I want to shift gears, man, and I want to talk a little bit about West Virginia, because it's one of those states that I haven't been to yet. That is on my list of places to get to, just because it's close by, and I know there's good deer there, and I do like that the type of terrain. At least I think that I do. I can't say too much because I haven't hunted it. I've hunted some stuff that's similar, but until I actually step foot on the soil and put my time in there, I don't want to speak too much about it. But if you wouldn't mind, man, just I guess describe to me a little bit about the area that you're hunting in West Virginia. And give me a little bit of like the topo and the habitat, and like. You mentioned like there's a food plot, like an area, or when you went to Kentucky and there was food. It was just like, you don't have that around where you're hunting and stuff like that. And so talk to me a little bit like what you're using as structure to help define, deer movement.
Yeah. So where I'm at in northern West Virginia, it's not quite as steep and gnarly as some parts of the state, the southeastern part of the state or the very southern portion. But you still get in my area typical elevation change from say the creek bottom to the top is maybe 300 feet in elevation gain, but that's in just a few hundred yards. So I mean, it's still pretty steep. So our ridge systems here are pretty long. The main place that I hunt, there's 3 main ridges that kind of run, say, southwest to northeast, and they're about 1.5 miles long. So there's not a lot of you kind of have these big long ridges with kind of flat tops, and there's benches on the sides of the ridges. So it's just a lot of big woods, laurel thickets and the creek bottoms, big hardwoods. Some of the stuff that I hunt has been timbered out, so really, really thick areas, greenbriers, blackberries, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, it depends, mainly what I look for when I'm trying to find spots to hunt. You know, the benches that run the sides of these ridges, like the leeward side of the ridge. I'm looking for those benches that are, top third elevation line and with some kind of cover. The one spot that I've got that's really good that always produces, there's a small patch of laurel, like mountain laurel, that's up high on the ridge, which is kind of rare. Usually it kind of sticks to the creek bottoms here, but there's a patch of mountain laurel that sits right on that third elevation line down from the top. And that's, the deer always use that for bedding. So, I look for stuff like that, connecting features between ridges. You had a big ridge system that, connects another ridge system with, a saddle or, something like that. I'll look for that.
All right, folks, we're back. Sorry about that little technical interruption. I've been having a string of these technical interruptions. I feel like I might be on like the watch list for like the NSA or some other government body with an acronym or something like that. Like I'm doing some shady dealings. I'm actually selling like black market masks over here for people. That's I shouldn't joke about that because I probably will get arrested or something. But anyway, since things are getting crazy. But anyway, what we were talking about, Jared, you were just kind of mentioning, we were talking about the structure in the area that you live in. And I think the last thing you were kind of mentioning was, you're really kind of focusing, on that top third and like the bench systems that run those top thirds and looking for those bench systems, in that top third that have some type of like side cover or cover associated. I think that's where we were at. So I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah. So like I was saying, I'm looking for, like I said, those benches on the leeward sides of these ridges, and I'm looking for some kind of cover, either non-laurel or they've done some type of logging, either clear cut or select cut. And if I can find a bench that connects two of those spots like that, which I've got a couple spots like that, I mean, it's pretty much dynamite. There's going to be doe bedding around there and even buck bedding. So, that's kind of what I look for. And, you can kind of find spots like that on the aerial maps. If you can find a view of it when it's taken in the wintertime, you can really see those mountain laurel patches. And I really key in on those, and those are always really, really good.
It's interesting that you're kind of talking about those bench systems that are running together, because that's one of the things in the one big woods piece that I've hunted that I've learned, one, from my buddy who's hunted it frequently, and two, just from like, the first year I hunted it, I had like a 1 day worth of scouting, and then I hadn't been back since. I had some other places I was hunting, and then I'm going back this year, and I was scouting it this winter. And with 1 year of kind of like hunting it under my belt and going back and have some time to look at the map more and talking to my buddy, it's like you quickly realize that, like, man, it's those ridge systems and finding places where those ridges and benches all kind of dump into one another. Like when you find that,
exactly,
that's kind of where all the action is, because in those big wood settings, man, like, it's like finding deer in those places with limited structure is hard. And if you aren't in the right place, man, it can be a long, lonely season because you may not see deer for days. You know what I mean? Like, like to where it's like we were talking earlier about being in the game. Like you don't even know what sport you're playing some days.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly right.
And so that's the one thing that I really appreciate about that type of setup is that, like, you got to know your stuff. And then once you start to figure it out, like those things really pop out to you on the map. It's like, it's almost like they start to glow. It's like, bing, 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 right here. This is one, right here's one. Just because when our eyes started seeing like where I started picking up like all the sign and recognizing where the sign started getting heavier and stuff like that, it was always in those places, and like you would walk along. And the other crazy thing was too, is that like, there wouldn't be a ton of sign along the way. It's not like you would find like a rub line that you could just like follow out and be like, boom, rub line led me right to his bed or right to like his primary scrape area or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's like you'd be walking along and you'd see, like, I'll give you an example. There was one place we had a deer that was probably he's Boone and Crockett, right? There were two that were on the same camera. You're walking along, you would have no clue by the sign that was in there that there were two Boone and Crockett caliber deer that are living in there. And you're just walking along, you see like a small rub, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, and I'm not even joking, there's a scrape the size of a car hood. Like, you know what I mean? And the one buck we have on camera is like bedded in it. like laying in it. You know what I mean? And it's just
Yeah.
crazy because there was nothing along the way that would tell you that, and just like all of a sudden, bam, and it was right. Actually, it was a pretty big bench, and it's actually one that you can't even really see on the map, and it just kind of pops out of nowhere, and that's where all the action is, and it's consistent action too. It's not rut specific or anything like that. It's not cruising. It's like they live there.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I see too here is that, you could have several bucks in one area and there's just not the sign that you would suspect, with that many deer. Like you would think that there'd be just rubs and scrapes everywhere, but there's not. And, you can't really scout, at least not in this area where I'm at. You can't base, your hunts off of that, heavy sign because it's just not there, which is weird to me. But, I guess I've just kind of gotten used to it over the years. And, I'm looking for sometimes one or two small little rubs that are just on the edge of bedding that tell me that there's a buck using it.
Yep.
And, this one buck here that I killed back in 2016, big, mature 5.5-year-old buck. And where he was spending most of his time, there wasn't 5 rubs in there that were bigger than a bottle. I mean, just small little rubs that you would make like a 2-year-old would make. So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know what about these big wood deer, but they don't leave a lot of sign, at least not in this area. So,
right. I think too, and like my buddy and I've had long conversations about this, like trying to figure it out sometimes over drinks where it starts to get nonsensical, but, it, I think it has a lot to do with, and I don't think I'm saying anything that people haven't said before, but it's just like your deer density, right? It's like competition, right? Like it's so much like this one particular area. There's so much land, and like the deer density isn't high, and so they just don't have the competition or the need to really throw down a ton of sign. You know what I mean? Like there's not just that much. There's not that much competition. They don't see them as threats, or those deer in particular are so dominant that they're just not fooling with it. You know what I mean?
That could be it too. Yep.
Because I don't know. Because I mean, but the thing that was crazy though in this particular spot was like you have two literally world class animals that their core areas are literally overlapping. Like, how are they not throwing down sign and like trying to assert their dominance? You know what I mean? Like that was the part that was like that was blowing my mind a little bit. Unless one was just so much older than the other one that he's on the downhill slide and he's like, look, man, I'll take whatever sloppy seconds I can get from you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's like, unless that was kind of the mindset. But, talk to me, like you mentioned that deer that you ended up arrowing that was, 5.5 years old, an old deer. Talk to me a little bit about that hunt, man. Like, how'd you find that deer? How did that hunt play out?
Yeah, so like I was talking before about that patch of mountain laurel that's on the side of that ridge, that's where that buck was bedding at. And it was funny because, I had been getting pictures of this buck for, since he was 2.5 years old. And, this was kind of before I, looked into the beast hunting tactics and stuff like that. I hadn't really put that kind of stuff together yet. And then, in 2015, I started reading on it, and that spot on the side of that ridge had always been a good spot, and I'd killed a couple bucks out of there, and I never really pieced together why they were there. And then when I started, following Dan and following the hunting bee, stuff like that, it all kind of clicked and made sense why they were there and when they were there, on certain winds. And I put a camera kind of on the outskirts of the bedding area summer of 2016. And there were 3 different bucks using that area. And there was actually a lot bigger than the one I killed. He was only a 3-year-old. He was over 140. He was a good deer. And I just kind of put a plan together to hunt that spot to try to kill any one of those bucks. I'd have shot any of them.
Right.
And that spot was set up perfect because, it's kind of high on the side of that ridge. There's a creek bottom that you can access. And, with the wind out of the southwest, which is our predominant wind, early season, it sets up perfect for that. So plan was to enter from the creek bottom and then kind of go up the side of this ridge. And there's a pretty steep ditch that kind of just cuts straight up, like a rounded ditch coming out of the ridge. And I basically just used that ditch to access the tree that I was going to hunt. So I figured out this buck was exiting this bed on the edge of this laurel thicket and just kind of dropping down the hill. I suspect because there were some oaks dropping at a little lower elevation, and there was just a few rubs, coming out of there that kind of told me where he was headed. So I snuck up that creek bottom, up the side of the ridge, up the ditch, and then I set up right on the edge of the ditch. And I think it was the 1st of October I shot him, but it was the very first sit in that spot. And I watched him stand up out of his bed at like 65, 70 yards. And he just slowly fed his way straight down that rub line where I'd planned. And I aired him just perfect as could be.
You read the script.
Yeah, just perfect. I mean, it just hardly works out that way, but that was one of those ones where it just worked.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like it worked out that way because like you had the pieces put together. You know what I mean? It's like that's one of those instances where it's like you thought you knew what he was going to do and you were right. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a lot of luck involved there. That was a lot of understanding what was going on and reading the sign and making your best play. What wind were you playing there? I mean, were you having to did you give him the wind on his exit?
So where the bed was at in relation to the tree that I hunted, so the wind coming over that ridge was pretty much coming down at an angle, and I wasn't giving it the wind at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the day that I shot him, we had a pretty consistent, like 5 to 10 mile an hour wind. And I think that helped me a lot by keeping that steady current over that ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, the thermals were rising. It was a pretty warm afternoon. I think it was in the low 70s. But the thermals going up the hill were going off at an angle, kind of away from, where the buck was bedded at. So even the rising thermals were missing him by probably 50, 60 yards.
Right.
But by the time he actually stood up out of his bed, the wind had kind of calmed down and the thermals started to drop. And I remember throwing milkweed, like right before I saw him, the milkweed was just flowing straight to the creek bottom. So
nice.
It's pretty much, bulletproof setup.
Nice. Yeah. That's the ticket there, man. What did you, after you stuck an arrow in him, what was your first thought?
Yeah, just kind of disbelief, really. I mean, that was my first like real, beast style kill. That was pretty much all planned out from the start.
Right.
I've killed a lot of bucks before in the early season, and I'd kind of started to piece it together, that I could kill a buck before October 10th. That was kind of always my goal, to kill one before then, because it seems like they're on a pretty consistent pattern. And if I can get pictures of one or, observe one coming out of the bedding area, that they kind of do the same thing that first part of October. And then,
right.
As you get farther into October, they kind of break away and start doing other things. But yeah, it was one of those deals that worked out really, really well, and still my oldest buck to date.
Nice.
5.5-year-old buck in this part of West Virginia is
that's
pretty rare.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of them.
Yeah. I hear you there, man. That's for sure. I kind of feel the same way as you, man. Like one of my goals, I always kind of talk about this. Like I always try to make goals for myself of what I want to do next and stuff like that. And for me, my goal is to consistently kill bucks in October. For me, like middle of October, like I want to start killing my bucks in Pennsylvania before like the 15th of October.
Yep.
And the reason being is like, I was talking to my buddy Chad Sylvester from Exodus. We were talking the one day about this. Actually, I think we talked about that on his podcast. But he was like, what do you consider early season? And I said, middle of October, like the 15th. And he felt more like just right before that pre-rut time period. Like, so like the 22nd, 23rd, like right. He's like anytime before that. And I said, and I agree with him, but I was like, my season comes in like the 21st of September, because I live in a special regs unit in PA. I was like, so by that time, I was like, I've already been hunting 4 weeks, and the deer have already been pressured for 4 weeks. I was like, so for me, I was like, it's really like that first 2 weeks of October, like I would like to have it done. I was like, because I just feel like the guys that get it done that time of year consistently, like those dudes are just killers. Like they, you know what I mean? Like Andy May. Like that dude kills a big
Yeah,
deer like every
exactly.
October. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you put him on the moon and he'll kill a big deer, but
He could kill a big buck in the Walmart parking lot, but
he could too, man. But that's my goal. I'm the same as you. It's like I want to start doing that, and also because like I travel for rut every year, and so it's like
yeah,
with Pennsylvania season, like our archery season really kind of ends like there's a week between it's like a week before Thanksgiving. I think it stops, right? And then so it's like it's kind of short. Like you kind of miss like the best part of the rut, that late part of the rut or whatever. Then that's usually when I'm just getting back from Iowa, Ohio, Missouri, wherever. You know what I mean? I'm usually just getting back then. So it's like I really only have till the end of October to try to kill something in PA usually. Which is another reason why I'd like to get it done earlier. I thought I had one on like Dead to Rights last year, man. I had one on a pattern that I thought I was just like, man, this should be a slam dunk. And then he ghosted me. And then I caught back up with him on I had him on camera, and then I moved another piece of the property, and I ended up scouting and finding him on a freelance hunt, and found him, and just, we locked eyes, saw each other, and that was it, and I never saw him again after that. So, but that's my goal. I'm right there with you, man. Trying to get those October bucks, man. So I feel like I'm adequate, I guess we could say, as a deer hunter.
Well, I don't know. I like that early part of the season just because your average guy isn't hunting yet. Those guys that wait until the end of October till it cools down. But man, I like hunting when it's hot. As miserable as it can be, just because there's no pressure, and I really just feel so much more in the game just because I can put all my scouting into practice, and I feel like I can really plan everything out, and it's just, I don't know, it's such a cool a tactic, I guess you could say, just because it's you can kind of plan everything out, and when it works out the way you want it to, it's a lot of fun hunt that way. And
right.
Like you said, I kind of always set the goal of October 10th to try to kill one, and I usually do pretty good. I've gotten better at it over the years, and I think I've become a lot worse rut hunter. I like the early season better than the rut, just because everything kind of goes out the window, and
right.
I get more frustrated during the rut these days than I do the early season.
Yeah, that's fun. You sound like my buddy Greg Litzinger. He says the same thing. Like rut starts coming up, and I'll be getting excited because I'll be getting ready to go on a trip, and he's like, "Man, I hate the rut. I hate it." he's like, I lose more opportunities for deer during the rut than any other time of the year. He's like, I'll see him, and then it's like I get a shot. He's like 10 yards away, then he sees a doe, and he like takes off running. He was like, what the hell just happened? So, but man, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit of mobile and saddle hunting, while I had you on before I let you go. We've talked about mobile hunting and how much of that's a part of, what you do. Of course, you work, for TETHRD. And like I said at the top, like my introduction to you really was, I've been saddle hunting for 2 full seasons now, and like that's it, dude. I mean, I'm ate up with it. I love being in a saddle. The only thing that I added to my game this year was added a ghillie jacket, because the beauty of hunting out of a saddle is that I can take all my stuff in, and I'm not taking much in. Put a ghillie jacket on, and if the hunt calls from the ground, I can hunt from the ground. If it calls to hop into a tree, I can hunt from the tree, and it allows me to be that multiple and that versatile. And I mean, I even take my platform with me turkey hunting. I'm using it as a seat. You know what I mean? I just roll in, put it on I take a little thermos seat pad that I cut in half and put it under my rear end so it doesn't hurt. And I use that as a seat, and so I got a nice little rig set up, man. And that was kind of whenever I was first getting into it, man. I was watching a lot of your videos about climbing mechanisms and stuff like that, and trying to figure out what my method was going to be and all those things. So I want to kind of go through what your setup is, what you're using, and of course why. So, if you would just talk a little bit about your saddle. I'm assuming you're probably hunting out of the Phantom at this point. So if you would just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll just kind of go through your gear.
Yeah. So I started saddling back in like 2014. So I've had a big, evolution, the whole gamut of saddles that I've run through, and DIY platforms and all this stuff. I mean, I started back before you could really buy a lot of this stuff that's out now. So, I'm kind of glad because I got to go through, building all that stuff, and I love doing that kind of thing. So, I kind of, kept evolving in my setup, and of course, TETHRD come out, and I'm good friends with Greg and Ernie, and I got to be part of, all the testing and all that of all that stuff. So, obviously when, we started with tethered, I started using all that and, hunted out of the Manus, for full season or whatever. And then, before the Phantom come out, this spring I hunted out of it all last year. And, I used the Phantom and the Predator platform. And, my setup's pretty simple, just the saddle, the platform, and my two climbing methods are either some modded hot helium sticks with an aider, or I'll use climbing spikes. And I use the climbing spikes probably 95% of the time. If it's legal to use, I use the climbing spikes just because it's just so much faster and easier. And, my setup is, they're under 3 pounds. So it's hard to beat, for lightweight, but, it's pretty simple setup. I use the sticks on public land when the spikes aren't legal, but, it's a pretty slick system. I think with my spikes, the saddle and my ropes and the platform, I'm at like 8.5 pounds. So
I know, man.
Pretty
crazy.
Lightweight.
Yeah, for sure. And are you using the Predator platform is what you're using?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for folks out there that are listening, like if you wouldn't mind, like I've mentioned it before, I think in the past, but like in your opinion, like what are the pros and what do you like about a platform versus using some type of like, squirrel steps or whatever the case might be?
Yeah. So the platform, to me, I just like to be able to stand up and pivot myself around, more like a traditional tree stand, especially on a long sit. I'll stand up and turn around and face away from the tree just to, give myself a break for a little bit. But, I tried the steps and stuff like that and some other methods. And, with stuff like that, all your weight is in the saddle all day long. So, if your saddle's not like fine tuned, like perfect to how you need it, you're going to have some uncomfortable sits. So the platform is just, it's a little bit more comfortable for me. I think it's easier to shoot from. I can shoot 360 degrees around the tree without, moving a whole lot. It just takes a little bit of practice. But, you got a weight trade off, a little bit heavier, a little bit more to pack. But, for comfort and shooting ability, I think I think the benefits outweigh the cons of that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And that's what I always kind of tell people if they're thinking about it and they're like, should I get the platform or not? I'm like, look, especially if you're making a transition from a tree stand, like for me, whenever I had Greg on, like he and I talked about it, and we actually did a session where he interviewed me, like he took over the show and interviewed me as like a newer saddle hunter or whatever.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. And what I always said was that, I wanted to make the transition because of all the things we talked about during this entire episode, this evening. It was just about how mobile you hunt, how I like to hunt mobile. And like, I just wanted something that was going to fit that. But my biggest concern was just making the transition. And so I wanted something that gave me a sense of familiarity to a stand.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was still that one little piece that like still felt somewhat like, oh, I get this. I understand this. This feels similar, and so that to me was like the thing that made it so easy for me to make the move to it, because from that point it was just a matter of getting comfortable shooting, and it's not nearly as hard as people think that it is. And the platform for me really was like the thing that kind of sealed the deal. And being comfortable in shooting, just, loading your hips into the saddle when you're taking a shot and, allowing that to kind of almost be your foundation, and, knowing what I was doing with my feet just put my mind at rest to a degree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're coming from a tree stand to the saddle, I mean, the platform definitely makes sense. I mean, you're already dropping a lot of weight and bulk anyways, just by switching to that system. So, once you get comfortable, using the saddle, then you can move on to trying those other methods. And that's the cool thing about it, is there's so many different setups you can use on any given hunt. I mean, you can switch it up every hunt if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have hunts where I'll just use the top of my sticks. If it's going to be just an hour or two or whatever, and you want to go super late, you can do that. So it's a versatile setup for sure. And, it definitely takes some more practice and stuff like that. But I think once you get used to it, it's just so hard to beat, especially, if you're like me and you sell film and you carry that kind of gear, it just makes it so much more streamlined,
Yep.
easier to use, I think.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, man. It's I'm the same as you, where it's like depending on how long I'm going to hunt. So, like for example, if I'm going in on a morning in October, maybe before work, and I'm only going to be able to hunt for like 2 hours, maybe. It's like I don't want to take the platform. I just take my sticks and I stand on the top. I cut my lone wolves off at like 17 inches and put a double step on the top of each of them, and I'll just stand on that top step for those 2 hours, because my feet can tolerate that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's it, and I only carry 2 sticks, and I use a 5-step climbinator. And then with that, it's like I can usually get right around, like, if I really stretch them, and then I kind of stretch my platform too, I can probably be at around 16 feet at my platform,
Yeah.
And then if I need to get a little higher than that, I carry like one Bullman step with me that I could literally step on a Bullman step and step up and probably get my platform to like 18. And that's
that's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's what I run, because I'm finding a lot of times that I don't really need to get much higher than like that 16 foot or whatever. Like I'm in pretty good shape, and most of the time, because especially whenever I'm traveling to hunt, I don't always know where I'm going to end up, and I don't always want to carry a 3rd stick or a 4th stick with me, because I don't know how far I'm going to have to hike and stuff like that, and I just don't want to have to deal with it. And so I just use those 2 sticks and a 5-step climbinator, and if I need that extra 2 feet, that little Bullman step is like next to nothing, and it'll get me that extra 2 feet if I need to get to it. And so that's kind of what I run, and it's served me well. I don't ever plan to turn back, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, and I find myself hunting pretty low during the early season. You guys pretty good covered, but as the foliage falls off, I find myself getting way up there. I had a tree that I had last year. I think I was 45 feet in.
Oh man, yeah, that's you got a little pucker factor on that one.
Yeah, I maxed out the pull-up rope and drug the bow halfway up the tree, and it was just one of those spots on the side of a ridge where to get the wind in my favor, I just had to go below where they were traveling, and didn't want to be eye level with them. So it wasn't an ideal setup, but you can do it if you need to. It's just it gets a little hairy at times.
yeah, for sure, man. Well, with that, dude, I think we covered just about everything, man. I appreciate you coming on and chatting. We got to make sure we stick together, since we're brothers of the guitar and of the saddle, and make sure we stay in touch. But before I let you go, if you wouldn't mind, tell folks out there where they can find out more about you, where they can follow along with you and get your content.
Yeah, so I'm kind of all over the place. I do stuff for the Tethered Nation YouTube. I've got my own YouTube that's under Flinging Arrows. And I've got another YouTube that I do with a buddy of mine that's called Hunt Appalachia. And, I kind of post between all 3 of those. My Instagram is J_SHAF30. So I post some stuff on there. But, yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. But I try to put out some decent content, during the season. So check it out.
Yeah, man, the videos are good, man. Keep them coming. Shreds the guitar, so make sure you watch the shred videos that he puts up as well. And look, he's a fellow beast hunter and a saddle hunter. So like, give him a like, give him some love. Thanks, Jared, for coming on, brother. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a subscribe there as well. I'll be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Gumleaf USA Boots. And until next time, we'll see y'all.